The previous Shiur, last week, we went through the two parts of the goirol. The part of making the goirol, meaning to say is taking out the two tickets, like the Lashon HaMishnah calls the tickets GOIROLOIS, taking them out of the box. And then also the part two, after taking the two tickets out of the box, putting them onto the two karbonos, the Shnei Seirim. One was on the right, one was on the left. And it was a good siman if the Lashem went on the right. So there were two parts to the goirol. Both parts, as we spoke about, the Eraisa side, a part of taking out the tickets, and side the part of putting the tickets onto the karbonos. The goirol, the goirol that was done in the Bais Hamikdash on Yom Kippur. This week, the Gemara, we're learning about it. The Gemara speaks about if the goirol is ma'akev. Is it an avoida? The part of putting the two tickets onto the karbonos, that is not ma'akev. But the Gemara is back and forth about the goirol itself, meaning to say is taking out the two tickets from the box. Is it ma'akev or is it not ma'akev? That's the discussion in this week's limud. Is it ma'akev? Meaning to say, what happens if they take the two seirim, the two karbonos, that were prepared for the avodas Yom Kippurim, and they say this one is Lashem and this one is Lazazel, without taking out tickets, without putting the tickets. That's a discussion. But the part two is not ma'akev. Part one, the Gemara speaks about lahalacha zok the Rambam. The Rambam is in Perek Gimel of avodas Yom Kippurim. Zok the Rambam like this: lahalacha. Part one, says the Rambam, is ma'akev. The part of taking out tickets, and obviously by taking out the tickets, whatever ticket is in the right hand, that chooses what's going to be the right the one on the right, the carbon on the right, if it's Lashem or Lazazel, and what's on the left. So by choosing, taking out the tickets out of the box, Zok the Rambam, it's ma'akev. You can't just go and say this carbon is Lashem, this carbon is Lazazel. However, once you took the tickets out of the box, and in your right hand is whatever, either Lashem or Lazazel, and the other one is in the left hand, once you have that, putting it down is not ma'akev. L'alacha, as is the Rambam. Shehanocha mitzvah she'ena ma'akeves. Putting it down is not ma'akev. V'hahagrola, however, making the etzem goirol, like the Rambam, is ma'akev. Afalpi she'ena avoida. It's not avoida. Even part one, taking out the tickets, is not avoida. However, it's ma'akev. Now the Rambam continues lefikach, something that's not brought in our Gemara. Not what we're learning now, the fourth Perek of Yoma. It's not anywhere in Yoma, but it's not, even though the Gemara speaks avoida, lav avoida. Zok the Rambam, could a zar do the goirol? Could he do part one? Could he do part two? Zok the Rambam, lefikach, hanocha, that's not ma'akev. Putting the tickets down on the karbonis, it's not ma'akev. A zar could do.
How would he do it?
Masha Enkain. One second. Masha Enkain, taking out the tickets. Masha Enkain, taking out the tickets. Hayois, it's ma'akev. It's possible zar.
How would anyone, other than the person taking them out, put them down? You're saying the Chaim hands it off to his...
Correct. Very good. You want to know how would a zar do part two? L'chayra.
You need to do part one.
The part one was done by a Kohen, which is ma'akev. Yeah. So l'chayra, the answer is very clear. The Kohen gave over, which we already spoke about, that the Kohen Gadol did the avodas shchita, and he gave over and he moved on to the next. There was a lot to do. So he took the tickets, he took them out, and then putting it down, could be putting it down takes a little bit of time. The animal is moving. Or the zar wants to be part of it. Could he do it? Halacha l'maisa, could he do it? Maybe what's the maila? That's a good question. But could he do it? The kohen took out the tickets, and he's holding the two tickets, and the zar's there, and the zar takes the right ticket in his right hand, the left ticket in his left hand, and he puts it down. So that's the din that the Rambam says, which is a mafurish Yerushalmi. Mafurish, Al Kapam, it's before like that in the Yerushalmi, that you could It's the way how you learn, how the Mefarsh Yerushalmi explained that that's what the state in the Yerushalmi, that the part 1 a zar cannot do, and part 2 the zar could do. Frek the Lechem Mishnah. Why can a zar do part 1? Why can a zar do the part of taking the goirola, take the tickets out, the goirolis out? And the Lechem Mishnah explains, the Lechem Mishnah brings a Gemara by us in Yoma, that a zar was able to do even a shechita on Yom Kippur. That's him. You have to understand why the Lechem Mishnah has to bring a rai from shechita by Yom Kippur. But a zar could do shechita any day of the year. Shechita ksheira bazar. The goirol is before the shechita. Frek the Lechem Mishnah, why can a zar do the goirol? Why can he do part 1? Even the part of taking the tickets out of the box, that's before the shechita. What happened? You take the 2 tickets out, and you put it on the 2 karbonos, and then afterwards goes the chatos lashem. Yeah, the Lechem Mishnah brings from a Gemara that the power of the Kohen Gadol zar k'shecht. But al kapanim shchita ksheira b'zar. Frek the Lechem Mishnah. Why can a zar, a Yisrael, do the goyrol? The Pri Chadash has a sefer Mayim Chaim on the Rambam, and he asks bedoime to this question from Menorah. Menorah, it's based off a Gemara that we learned already in Chavdal Ramad Bais, and as is gepaskent in the Rambam, that Menorah is ksheira bazar. A Menorah is able to a zar, a Yisrael is able to light the Menorah. So frek the Pri Chadash, just like a zar can light the menorah, why can't it's lav avoida? It's ma'akev. But it's lav avoida, a zar k'shecht. So why can a zar take out the tickets? The Lechem Mishnah also asked the same question. I left out that point from shchita. Shchita is ma'akev. It's lav avoida, but it's ma'akev. It's ksheir bazar. So the goyrol also, it's lav avoida, like the Rambam says himself. It's ma'akev. Why can a zar do it? The Lechem Mishnah answers the following. The Lechem Mishnah says that there's a difference between shchita and the goyrol. Shchita is lav avoida. It's totally not avoida. What does it mean? It's totally not avoida. Shchita, not only it's kosher bizarre, it's a mishnah that shchita is ksheira b'nashim of kachim. Shchita is ksheira b'nashim, and by chulin also it's ksheira b'nashim. So Mele Zok the Lechem Mishnah, shchita is lav avoida. It's not avoida at all. It's a lav avoida at all. That's why it's ksheira bizarre. Masha'enkein, the avoid of the GOIROLOIS, it's true that the Gemara says that it's lav avoida, but it doesn't mean it's not avoida at all. It's not a full-fledged avoida. Like he brings, Rashi says by Oslam Atesam Bais, lav avoida, that the skam could do it. But not the pshat is that it's not avoida at all. We'll soon see a little bit more about it, but lav avoida just means that it's not a full-fledged avoida. By shchita, it's not avoida at all, that's why zar could do it. Masha'enkein, when it comes to the goyrol, it's not totally not a goyrol, it's a shtickle not a goyrol, avoida. Lav avoida, it's not a full-fledged avoida, but it's a shtickle avoida, and that's why it's possible bizarre. That's the Lechem Mishnah's teretz. Teretz number 2, Zokter B'Seh Zalman, and then we'll understand from Rabbi Zalman a little bit more the Lechem Mishnah's teretz. Rabbi Zalman says that true, the goyrol that we're learning about now, the goyrol that was done on Yom Kippur is lav avoida. It's not avoida at all. However, it's lav avoida like shchita of avoidas hakarbonis. These avoida of karbonis, maisa karbonis. The Rambam has a whole chela called maisa karbonis. It's not a avoida of maisa karbonis. It's not a avoida of a carbon. However, Dr. B'Seh Zalman, it's avoidas Yom Kippurim. Shchita is lav avoida at all. shchita would be avodas carbon, and it's lav avodah, so it's not avodah at all. Therefore, it's kosher bazar. Masha inking goirolois. Goirolois is taka lav avodah and all. When it comes to karbonos, it's not avodah. However, when it comes to the avodas Yoma Kippurim, it is avodah. So let's go back. The kasha was just like a zar ketshech, because it's lav avodah. Why can a zar on Yom Kippur pick out the tickets, do the goyrol? So the teretz is shchita ksheira bazar, because it's lav avodah. Mashenkin over here, the goyrolais, even though like the Gemara says lav avodah, it's only lav avodah lagabi what? Lagabi the karbonos part. But it's an absolute avodah lagabi ma'aseh Yom Kippurim. That's what's possible bazar. I want to ask the Olam, if you say that picking out a goyrol is called an avodah, it's not avodah of karbonos, but it's avodas Yom Kippurim, so then what's the difference between part one? So the Rambam, it's ma'akev, it's posel bazar. Part two of putting it down, it's not ma'akev, it's kosher bazar. Why is it kosher bazar? Just like part one is considered avodas Yom Kippurim, and that's why it's posel bazar, so the second part also, why it's not ma'akev, okay, but if you do it, it's avodas Yom Kippurim, that's not ma'akev. So why the Rambam says the part two of putting the tickets onto the karbonos? So the Rambam, that is not ma'akev and it's kosher bazar. Even if it's not ma'akev, it's avodas Yom Kippurim. L'chayr, you have to say, to explain that because it's not ma'akev, memela it's not avodah. Meaning to say, if it would be an avodah, you can't skip. Avodas Yom Kippurim is ma'akev. The Rambam is saying because it's not ma'akev al korchach, it's not an avodah. Because if it's an avodah, it's ma'akev. L'chayr, you have to say. But al kapanim zok to Evan Ozel, teretz number 2 is the reason why a zar cannot do the goyrol is because it's an avodah. A zar gets shecht because it's lava avodah. Masha inkin, the goyrol is an avodah, so therefore he can't do the goyrol. Teretz number 1, the Lechem Mishnah says it's a shtickle avodah of karbonos. Rabbi Zalman says it's totally not avodah of karbonos, but it's avodas Yom Kippurim, and that's why it's ma'akev. Teretz number 3, Dr. Bchatzkel Abramsky, and then we're going to sum it up. Teretz number 3, Bchatzkel Abramsky says like this: Be'etzim, picking out the goyrol is lav avodah. Totally not an avodah. Totally not an avodah. It's bedoimet to shchita. Just like shchita is lav avodah, it's ksher bazar. Why can't the goyrol also be kosher bazar? So he says the following. He brings a Gemara. I could go into the Gemara, but he brings a Gemara, and the Gemara says that besides that, when a kohen does an avodah, that's something that's avodah is ma'akev and it's posel bazar. Something that's done that shafs a chalois, which means to say is, it's not just you're bringing the wood from one place to the other place, but it's shafing a chalois, which means, to understand by us, the goyrol, it's not just picking out the tickets. By you picking out the tickets, whatever's in your right hand, what does it mean shafing a chalois? Whatever's in your right hand makes that the right carbon, that's what's in your hand. Either Lashem or Lazazel. It's making a chalois. It's not just that you're doing, if the pshat is you would just take out tickets. Taking out tickets, that itself is lav avodah. It's 100% lav avodah, but it's shafing a chalois. The part 2 of putting the tickets down on the karbonos, it's lava avoid. It's also not shafing a chalois because the karbonos were picked out already. So therefore, teretz number 3 is, you know why it's posel bazar? Not because it's avoida. The reason why it's posel bazar is because it's shafing a chalois, as opposed to putting it down. It's not shafing a chalois. So we have three terutzim. Teretz number one is that the goyrol on Yom Kippur is a shtickle avoida. Even though the Gemara says lav avoida, it's somewhat of an avoida. Teretz number two, we said it's totally not an avoidas hakarbonos, but it's totally avoidas Yom Kippurim. And teretz number three is it's not avoida. But there's a different reason why it's possible bazar mitzad the din of that it's doing something. In last week's Shiur, we spoke about, it was the Panam Yafas' question, when you make the goyrol, you put both hands into the box, and the right hand takes out one, and the left hand takes the other one. Perek the Panam Yafas, when you take out with your left hand the left ticket, that part should be possible. Like the Gemara says, that avoida, to Gemara, the avoida that's done with besmoil is possible. So it's possible. It's effect upon Yafas. So we said already the Panam Yafas teretz is that it was beles breira, because if you take what was the other option? Take out one ticket, put it down, and then take out another ticket. It's like the Panam Yafas, that's not a goyrol. For the second one, it's not a goyrol because you know already what the second ticket is. That's why you have to take out both. But what was this question? The Panam Yafas question is that l'chayra the second ticket that you're taking out should be possible because avoida is possible b'smoil. So let's just recap based off what we spoke today. Loit Rabbi Zalman, we understand the question clearly, because Lamaisa Rabbi Zalman says that the avoida of the goirolois, it's avoida siyamik, it's avoida. Frekt upon him yafas, it's possible b'smoil. Loit the Lechem Mishnah that says that it's a shtickle avoida. We can also understand, because Lamaisa, it's a shtickle avodah, it's possible bizarre. But loit the question, loit the Lerchatzkel Abramski, that it's not avodah at all. So if it's not an avodah, then the smoil is kosher. So then that would be a teretz on the Panam Yafas question. Panam Yafa asked, the l'chor his left hand taking out a ticket, avodah possible smoil, it's not an avodah. It's true that l'tchatchila, you should always use your right hand, but it wouldn't passel it. So what do we have? We just spoke very clearly that the picking out is possible bizarre. Mashenkein, putting down is kosher bizarre. We know what you can't do. The Rambam says it's possible bizarre. Who has to do the goyrol? Does it have to be the kohen gadol dafka, or any kohen can do it? So the Pri Chadash and Rabbi Zalman over there say that any kohen can do it. It's only a zar that can't do it, because either, like we explained, that it's avodah, whatever the reason is, that's why a zar can't do it. But any kohen can do it. Me'idach, the Migdash David says, and they explain the reason why you don't need a kohen gadol is because this day you need a kohen gadol throughout avodas Yom Kippurim is where it says chukah. And that's only befnim with the big day love. This wasn't befnim with the big day love. It's mainly you don't need a kohen gadol. Be'idach, the Migdash David says, wait a second. The psukim, the Torah Akdosha, when saying about making the goyros like the Torah, v'nosan Aaron eshtei goyrolis. It says Aaron, the kohen gadol. The Torah says clearly that the goyrolis has to be with the kohen gadol. So how do you answer that?
No.
What, that it's not ma'akev? I have that written on the side, the Kobi Taka, it says Aaron, but it's Taka not ma'akev. That would be a pasha ter. It's richtig, very good. I wasn't sure. What'd say? But only. Yeah, so really, I mean, we're not making, when Rabbi Zalman says that it's only where it says chukah on the big day love and befnim. This wasn't the big day love and befnim, so it's not included in chukah. And even the Migdash David says, you know why you need a kohen gadol? Not because of chukah. You need a kohen gadol because it says v'nas and Aaron. So it's mamash mefurish. The pasuk says clearly v'nas and Aaron. It says kohen gadol. Yeah, I thought the same like Rabbi Yosef, what you're saying, that maybe it's not l'shin all of a cost of la'akev. I don't know. On this question, the Gvura Sari, the Shagas Arya says as we explained last week, the beginning of V'nasan Aaron is going on part 2. However, the part 1 of picking out doesn't say V'nasan Aaron, so for that you don't need a Kohen Gadol. V'nasan Aaron is putting a Shtei GOIROLOIS, but the part 1 you don't need a Kohen Gadol. The Pella is, I just don't understand. I have to be ma'ayin. Part 2 is kosher bizarre, the Rambam. Again, the Gvur Sari says that when the Torah says V'nasan Aaron, it's not going on picking out the goyrol. Picking out the goyrol, any kohen could do. However, the part 2 to put it on the karbonos, that's Kohen Gadol. That's where it's talking about. V'nasan Aaron is part 2. But part 2, we just saw the Rambam that says that it's kosher bizarre. Just last Shlom Inyan, it's a little bit evolving discussion today, but last Shlom Inyan, the Tshuva Me'ava asked his Rebbe, the Noid Yehuda, the following question. The Gemara, right in the beginning of the Perek, we learned already last week, the Gemara says that the box of where the tickets were in was made out of wood. The Gemara says, not a klisharis, but the Gemara says, why was it made out of wood? So the Gemara, Torah, chasa al mamonim shel Yisrael. It's costly to make it out of gold or silver, so you made it out of wood. This is like the Gemara. So the Tshuva Me'ava asked, he brings a whole list of different Gemaras, where the Gemara says they went all out in the Bais HaMikdash. And the Gemara says, you know why? Because ein aniyas b'makam ashiris. They went all out, ein aniyas b'makam ashiris in the Bais HaMikdash. They weren't worried to spend money to do it nice, to do it right, to do it fancy, to do it akavadik. So the Tshuva Me'ava asked his Rabbi, brings a list. And he says, sometimes you say ein aniyas b'makam ashiris, and sometimes you say ha-Torah chasam amayim shal Yisrael. That means the Torah was said, let's be careful on spending money. So which one is it? So the Rabbi Yehuda first compliments his Talmud that he says he's been expelled from the Bekiyas throughout Shas. And then he says a teretz, and he says that it's only when the difference is if it's a klisharis, like the Gemara, even himself, the Gemara Bais says you should be makdish it, and memela will be a klisharis. But he says the chiluk is if something is a klisharis, then you say ein aniyas b'makam ashiris. But if it's not a klisharis, then you don't say ein aniyas b'makam ashiris. This bowl, it's not a klisharis, and that's when it's made out of wood. That's the teretz of the Noid Yehuda. But the emes is the Ritva already addresses this question, and that's why I'm bringing in this piece over here, because let's see a little bit the Ritva. The Ritva doesn't ask the question, but the Ritva goes on the words of the Gemara, Torah chas al mamonim shel Yisrael. So the Ritva explains why. He doesn't say, why don't you say ein aniyas b'makam ashiris, but he says, why don't we spend money on Torah chas al mamonim shel Yisrael? Zok the Ritva, and I'm quoting, Kiven de lav midi de avoida hi kulahai. The GOIROLOIS lav avoida kulahai. It's not such a avoida. Like the Lach Mishnah, we totally understand that the Lach Mishnah says that shchita is totally not an avoida. However, GOIROLOIS is a shtickle avoida. That's the Lach Mishnah says. The Ritva already says this that we're learning this whole week. The GOIROLOIS in the Bais HaMikdash, even though it's avodas Yom Kippurim, but it's lav avoida kulahai. Like the Rebbe Zalman, it's an avoida, and like the Chatzkel Abramski, it's not an avoida. He says lav avoida kulahai. Then he also says it's only once a year. Ve'ein ela pa'amachas b'shana. And then he says also ve'ein hakalfi doiraisa. It's not doiraisa. What does it mean it's not doiraisa? We just finished last week a whole shiur. Of course it's doiraisa. And even this week also, it's clear, the psukim say you make the goyrol. What does it mean it's lav doiraisa? Lav doiraisa, this is important after the whole last week, and this week we have to understand like this. He's taking out the tickets, and putting it on the karbonis. Both of those are deraisa. Part 1 is ma'akav, part 2 is not ma'akav. But where you take the tickets from, that is not deraisa. It's actually a machlokes. The Ritva himself later brings it to machlokes. If you need to take it out of a kalfi, out of a box, could you take it out of a basket? So that's a shaila if it's a deraisa. Being zok the Ritva that taking the of course you have to pick out the tickets. That's deraisa. But where to take the tickets from? Do you have to take it from a box? It doesn't have to be from a box. It could be from a basket. That's why it was made shalates. That's why it was made shalates. But the etzem taking out the tickets, of course it's deraisa. And like we spoke all along from the Rambam, it's deraisa, it's ma'akiv, and it's possible bazar. Have a wonderful Shabbos.